Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com. Welcome back to How to Record and Release Your Song in 8 Weeks. We are moving right along through this song, and today we're going to talk about mixing. So I've already recorded everything up to this point, and I've been working on the mix, and what I want to do is jump into Pro Tools and show you what it's sounding like, how it's coming together, show you all the plugins I'm using, some of the settings I'm using, some of the thought process behind some of the sounds I'm getting, to give you a little bit of insight into how I like to mix. So let's jump in. All right, so let me play you a little bit of this interlude into verse 2, into a chorus, and then what I'll do is take away all the plugins, kind of hear where we came from, and then I'll show you some of the specific techniques and things I'm using on this song to get the mix to where it is.
We're getting lost outside, being tossed around by the waves of a bitter life. But we're the same inside, flesh and blood, image of the invisible design. Now I'm reaching out. It's always a good time to heal. It's always a good time to heal. When the world gets crazy and out of line, we can bind these wounds if we kill our pride. Oh, it's always a good time to heal.
Right, so it gives you a little taste of where we're at, and then let me close all these out. I'll just give you a little preview so you can see some of the plugins visually that are on here, get a sense of what I'm using. Let me get to the hook, and here we go. Chorus 2, and then what I'll do is I'm going to take away all the plugins in one click, all right?
Now I'm reaching out. It's always a good time to heal. It's always a good time to heal. When the world gets crazy and out of line, we can bind these wounds if we kill our pride. Oh, it's always a good time to heal. Why can't we heal?
Right, so you can tell obviously it got a little louder and it opened up, it got wider, and there's a lot of things happening here. So let's start with what's on the mix bus. These are things I mixed through for the most part. I went back to the virtual mix bus by Slate. I mixed through this years ago for many, many records, and this was like a thing where you put the mix bus plugin on, and then on every single individual track, you put the virtual channel on. Group them together, like I put them all in group 1, so I can flip between the 6 different consoles and I can drive the input and it'll do it on every single track, which is a handy feature. So I'm basically using this to simulate mixing through a console. I'm picking the SSL 4000 E channel here, the Brit 4KE. I like a lot of them. I've used the Neve, the Brit N a lot. And then one of my favorite records I ever used this plugin on was a Christmas EP I did for my church, and I mixed it all through the RC tube. And I actually love the sound of this. It's real fat and soupy. Not very bright and present, but it's nice. So anyway, you can pick a console, and this just gives you a little bit of separation, a little bit of depth that's missing in digital. It's a very, very subtle thing to hear, but I went back and played with that. I'm mixing through the virtual tape machine, which is adding a little bit of character and width to the song. I'm adding some actual stereo width with the built-in stereo width plugin in Pro Tools. I'm adding 42% wider, which is kind of cool. Take a listen to this.
Now I'm reaching out. It's always a good time to heal. It's always a good time to heal.
It just spreads it out past the speakers a little bit. I like a little bit of that. Too much of that, it gets weird. And then I love Mixcentric. I added this at the very end. This does something to the guitars on the edges if you do hard panning, which you should. and then it brings forward the drums and vocals in a really musical way. So I'll take it away and bring it back.
Now I'm reaching out. It's always a good time to heal. It's always a good time to heal. When the world gets crazy and out of line, we can bind these wounds if we kill our pride. Oh, it's all.
Mixcentric is cool because it's adding harmonics. So it's adding slight distortion, which gives you a little bit of sizzle on things, right? So it's not EQ that boosts what's there. It's adding harmonics, so like a sonic maximizer or something like that. And it's doing some compression, and then it's doing some EQ. It is doing a little bit of EQ. And you can't control it other than the more you increase it, the more extreme the settings get. And they're specifically dialed in by Greg Wells himself to kind of mimic some of the gear he has. And Greg Wells has a brilliant ear. And what he did with Waves, this is one of those actual plugins that's actually brilliant where they teamed up. It's not just some plugin that Waves created and they paid a guy to put his name on it. This is pretty brilliant and simple to use. You don't want to go beyond 12 o'clock or it'll get super crispy. But a little bit of this and turn the output down a little bit, this does wonders for your mix. So I'm mixing through those four on the mix bus. And then it's a lot of simple stuff from there. I mean, you're going to see the SSL channel strip on just about everything where this is my basic EQ, right? So like on the bass guitar, I'm scooping out a little bit of 690 and I'm giving a little bit of a boost at, 2K to make the finger picking, pluck through, cut through a little bit more. And I'm using the compressor. So 9 times out of 10 on a mix, you're going to see me use this plugin because it's one window. It's easy to do quick EQ, quick compression. I rarely use the gate, but I always do the EQ, and then I do that before the compressor, so I make sure that the dynamic section goes to the channel out, this little button here, which you can change the order of these plugins, inside of the plugin. So this puts the compressor at the end of the chain, which is how I like to mix. EQ, then compress, but you have the choice. And so I'm just mixing through those guys for the most part. There was not a lot of heavy EQ because I feel like I got the tones I wanted. I brightened up the acoustic guitar and put that through a little bit of a room reverb. So let's get a solo on this. Here's the acoustic guitar by itself. I opened it up a little bit, right? A little bit of a shelf lift, 1.5 dB at 8K, and then I scooped out a little bit around 850. It sounded kind of cheap. And then a little bit of a compressor and a little bit of a filter. Oh, turn that off. Just makes the guitar come alive. And then I added a room reverb. Puts it a little bit in the room, gives it a little bit of width, and all I'm using for room reverb is the stock reverb, one of the stock reverbs, there's a couple, the air reverb, and I'm using the drum room preset, one of my go-tos, and I'm just following that with a filter to roll off the low end and roll off the top end so that the reverb sounds a little more natural and warm, not too bassy, not too digitally, shiny at the top. So I'm using room reverb on a couple of things like this lead guitar here. Let's get that. That comes in here in a little interlude. Turn it off. It puts it a little bit in the right. I'm also using this delay, which is Echo Boy, and that's the delay you're hearing everywhere. I just started with the default settings. I switched to the space echo. I'm filtering off low end and high end, increasing the saturation a little bit. Pretty standard, right? And so I'm using that delay on all kinds of things. The X-Files sound. Let's get to that. Right, so allowing that to repeat and echo a little bit. Doing it on the lead vocals, a little bit in verse 1.
It's getting cold outside.
Turn those off.
It's near impossible to bridge the great divide.
That's the room reverb.
Yeah, it's a war outside.
That's the delay.
So I'm gonna stop and pray.
If I take those off and take off the SSL and the de-esser, this is what the raw vocal sounds like.
It's getting cold outside. It's near impossible to bridge the great divide. Yeah, it's a war outside.
Right? So all I'm doing on the lead vocal is just the littlest bit. I'm scooping out a little bit of 500 just to clean it up. The littlest bit of a bump, less than 1 dB shelf bump, at 8K. High pass. I love the SSL compression, so just dialing in a little bit. I'm looking for 3 dB gain reduction. Nothing crazy there. And I'm copying and pasting pretty much those settings on all the vocals. And you see I'm just using the delay and the room reverb to create a sense of space, get a little bit of width, create a little bit of an atmosphere. And then I'm automating those sends. So this is a little trick for you. Let's go ahead and, whoops, wrong button. Let's open this up a little bit. In the verse 1, I don't want a ton of delay. So I've got the delay level as an automation line.
It's getting cold outside.
I had it turned down from where I have it in verse 2. I don't mind the delay being louder, more prominent in verse 2.
We're getting lost outside, being tossed around by the waves of a bitter life, but we're the same inside.
Right, so I was letting the delay hang at that volume in the verse, but I felt like in verse 1 it was too distracting, so I can just automate the volume of the send, which is all I'm doing. I've got a bunch of tracks going to the same single delay plugin, but I'm just using sends to control how much goes to each, and that way you get fine-tuned delay levels and sounds on each track. You don't have to have multiple delays, just one delay plugin, which is nice. And then, I've got some layers here. You saw me lay down all these vocals, different layers. I added a couple more. Nothing crazy here. The biggest work done, to make a mix come together is EQing to make sure everything's got some clarity. And I just did little bits of EQ, and the secret is to do these EQ decisions while listening back in mono, and that's huge. I've got a bunch of videos on that. While mixing in mono is the secret. You can watch that video on the channel. But that's kind of what I'm doing to make sure that this mix pops, even if everything's collapsed on top of each other and I can hear everything. And then when it goes stereo, you have even more spread, which is nice. And then I'm trying to do little things to keep the song moving. So when we got to the bridge, I wanted to change it up. So a lot of things drop out and just kind of riff rock, guitar, bass, drums, vocals. All the keys go out and acoustic goes out. So I wanted to create some contrast. So I went with a gritty distortion vibe. So on the vocals, let's get back here. I took one of my favorite plugins, which is Fuzzwah. And this is a stock plugin that is highly underused and undervalued in Pro Tools. It is both a distortion box and a wah pedal. You have a lot of control over all those different settings, and then has a mix knob. So what I'm doing is blending in no wah, just the fuzz. I picked a frequency around 3K for the fuzz, mixing in 13%, and it gives me a cool vocal here.
Why can't we heal? Oh, why can't we heal? Yeah. Why can't we heal? Oh,
So it's a blend, right? So if I take it away,
why can't we heal? Oh,
that's the clean vocal, blended in 13%.
why can't we heal?
It's just a cool way to get some parallel distortion on the lead vocal.
Why can't we heal? Oh, why can't we heal? Yeah.
then I did something very similar on the drums. Here's the easy drum track that I just bounced down to a stereo file. I think I told you that most of the time I'll actually split these out to individual tracks. I liked the balance, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna bounce them out. So all I did on the drums was add some parallel compression, and I'm using the 1176 that Slate has, the blue stripe, and then I've crushed it with 20-to-1 ratio, crushed the input, but I'm just using the mix knob to mix in like 35% of that to create some parallel compression. So like if we're here in the hook, for example. That's the raw drums. So I'm just blending in the really hard. What is this, 38? If I go hard, this is what it sounds like. So that's the compressor, and then I'm just dialing that down to 38%, something like that, to give it a little bit more smack. And then what I was going to show you is in the bridge, I'm doing a similar distortion effect. I'm grabbing an Air Lo-Fi plugin, or I'm just adding some clipping and rectify distortion, then I'm turning it on and blending it at 62%. That's clean. Just adding a little bit of distortion. If I turn it up, you can hear what it's doing. Clean. And I'm just doing a little bit of a blend just to make the bridge feel a little different from the hook, and then a little different from the quiet chorus that's coming up. So it's all about contrast. So I'm going to go from the chorus to the bridge, and then we'll go to the quiet chorus, and you hear how it comes back in.
Why can't we heal? Oh, why can't we heal? Yeah. Why can't we heal? Oh, why can't we heal? Yeah. It's always a good time to heal. Yeah, it's always.
So again, couple of things going on here. Contrast, just arrangement-wise, oldest trick in the book is to drop down to just a guitar-only or piano-only chorus.
It's always a good time.
And then what I did was put a telephone effect on the vocal, and you could take or leave that here. You could keep it as is,
It's always a good time.
except for fuzz while would be off.
It's always a good time to heal.
But I preferred a little bit of a telephone effect.
It's always a good. It's always a good time to heal.
So there's no fullness, there's no low end with just the guitar and the filtered vocal to create contrast when the guitars, bass, and drums come back in.
It's always a good time to heal.
That note, bow. And then to build into the downbeat, I just did the old sort of reverse swell vocal technique, right, where I created these little guys. And all those are, in case you're wondering how to do this, is I took the word heal, which, right here.
To heal. Heal.
I took that,
Heal.
copied it, pasted on these individual tracks, and then I use Audio Suite plugins, but the idea, if you don't use Pro Tools, is to actually process the actual track. So I put a reverb on there, and I just literally processed it through a church and then a hall So it's all wet and delay and reverby. So it's going to say heal and then decay, right? So it's a nice long reverb decay. And once you've got that, then I use another plugin called Reverse, and it literally reverses that now echoey, decaying reverb. So you're hearing the decaying reverb backwards, which is, I'll just play one of them here. This guy up here. So you could reverse the word heal, but it's not nearly as cool as having a long decaying word heal and then reversing that. So you get that slow build up. And that kind of pushes us into the yeah when it goes back into the chorus.
Yeah, it's always a good time to heal. It's always a good time to heal.
And those are just little tricks. You know, it's mixing is twofold. It's one, the balancing and the clarity, right? Using volume, pan, EQ, and compression. So let's just take compression out for a second. Volume, pan, and EQ is the balance and clarity. That's how you make sure you hear everything. And that's where most people get stuck. This is not that it's easy, but most people don't do a good job of balancing and creating clarity there. That's the EQ and the volume and the panning. Then it's excitement, and that's where compression comes in and keeping things up front. And then it's the mix across time. How do you keep the arrangement interesting and have little bits of candy and tasty treats along the way? And that's kind of the stuff I just showed you, the distortion cutting in and out, the reverse swell, the contrast from the bridge to the quiet chorus to the loud chorus. How do we keep the momentum going? And that is a different type of mixing, and you have to add all those together to create your mix. So in general, we'll do one little, again, hook here, and we'll take away all the plugins so we can hear how things have panned out.
It's always a good time to heal. It's always a good time to heal. When the world gets crazy and out of line, we can buy.
Well, there we go. It's coming together. At this point, I would consider this a first round of mixing. What I'm going to do is walk away, come back tomorrow or another day, and listen for tweaks, usually volume, usually automation, some panning things that just might need to be tweaked, and maybe there's an EQ thing out of whack, but usually it's volume at this point that my ears don't notice after a couple hours of mixing. So I'm gonna come back with fresh ears, make some final adjustments, listen to it on different speakers. I love to listen to it on AirPods or earbuds or something like that, listen to it quiet, loud volumes, all of the above to get a sense of how it is sounding. And in the next video, we're gonna master this thing. And I'm gonna show you how to do that with some amazing tools that you can find online. We're gonna let the robots master our song, but I'm gonna show you how that process works. There's so many cool tools within these sort of auto mastering programs that are pretty legit. So we're gonna walk through those next week. That will give us our final version of the song. And then we'll have one more step, which is actually releasing this song to the world. So in the meantime, leave me a comment below and let me know if you completed your mix, and if not, when you're gonna finish your mix. And also, what did you think about this process? How do you think the song's coming along? Love to hear your feedback. It's always encouraging. And pick up your copy of my 6 Steps to a Radio Ready Song Guide. This is a resource I want you to have. It's gonna be a good companion to what we've been doing. It walks you through all 6 steps of the song creation process, most of which we're doing in this series, with a bunch of tips and tricks and best practices to make sure your song sounds as good as it possibly can before you go to release it. It's absolutely free. I want you to have it as my gift to you for being one of my students. Just go to radioreadyguide.com. You can pick up your copy there. I'm gonna link to it below the video as well. Hey, stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you on another video real soon.